Good morning. Hello, is this thing on? Is that how one is supposed to open all lectures? Is this thing on? All right, if you guys could take a minute to quiet down, take your seats, and we will get started. So welcome, this is our final CORE100 plenary address. It feels, I don't know, good to be at the end of November. It kind of feels like the finish line is in sight. I know it's always good to start a semester, but it's always good to end a semester too, and it's always good to look forward to break and turkey and all of those things. In a couple of weeks, we are going to have kind of a Q&A session here during this time, but this is the last talk. And I hope that you guys have enjoyed them as much as I have. I'm kind of happy to be going last because then I got to soak up the wisdom from all of my other colleagues before taking this stage. And there's something a little bit nostalgic in this for me too. I'm a 2002 graduate of this fine university. And the lessons that I learned in this place have affected me so much that I could think of nothing better to do with my life than come back and keep serving this community. 25 years ago, I was sitting somewhere over there, one of those seats, listening to somebody probably say some things that are going to be similar to what I'm going to say today. Maybe you remember some of these Uncle Ron speeches to help you get through college. I was thinking a little bit in this sort of nostalgic rumination about what has changed, what has stayed the same, what's different. Thankfully, a lot of things have stayed the same, and many of those things have been highlighted in this series. Dordt is still a strongly Christian university, and I really appreciated Dr. Bailey's time-traveling world tour of Christianity that gave us a real sense of the breadth of the body of Christ. And Dordt's commitment to being reformed hasn't changed. Dr. Dornbos showed us around the neighborhood a little bit. For some of you, those streets are the familiar ones that you played on as children, but for others, a lot of these ideas might be quite new. Dr. Fulkerson challenged us to focus on the world of ideas and to let the life of the mind nurture our souls as we grow. That too has not changed. But what has changed? Well, I suppose you need to look no further than my title slide to guess what I'm going to talk about. But don't worry. This isn't going to be one of those time management, you kids are a bunch of screenagers who waste all your time video games sorts of lectures. After all, 25 years ago when I was in college, the objectively two best video games came out, that being James Bond GoldenEye and Tony Hawk Pro Skater. If you've played them, you know what I'm talking about. And we could even binge Friends 25 years ago, even if we had to go to the library to pick up the DVDs. Trust me, the time management challenges of technology haven't changed all that much in the past 25 years. But I do think something has changed, and maybe has changed even more recently than that. I was recently talking with a junior who said that he couldn't understand freshmen at all. He didn't get you guys. I asked him to tell me more, and he said, I think it's because they had TikTok at such a young age. In his mind, something about being influenced by the latest viral dance craze or having such a focused echo chamber to inform and embolden young, impressionable minds led to some disconnect. Well, I'm too old to know very much about TikTok, although it didn't take Facebook very long to realize that I can be pretty easily mesmerized by woodworking videos of people making very intricate joints. No? Yes? Okay. And I'm not a sociologist either, so I can't offer you a data set and graphs of trends in TikTok usage. I'm a philosopher. So I want to take a higher view and ask some deeper questions. What is technology? And what is technology to you? I'm certainly not here to tell you that technology is bad, but I want to ask some questions about the role that it plays in our lives. Is technology a tool that can help build up, connect, and lead to flourishing, to use one of those famous Dort buzzwords? Or is it something that shapes and defines our worldview, leading us away from a proper biblical understanding of our place in God's world? And to be even more specific, can technology lead us away from a proper understanding of our place here at Dort University in 2023, embarking on a journey of education? How many of you are engineering students in this room? Can I get a few raised hands? Yeah, be proud. All right, that's good, that's good. I've been told that in the intro classes to engineering program, the professor will often hold up his phone and ask, "What is this?" And I think that's a great question for all of us. Last week, Dr. Westphal reminded us that the Reformed tradition focuses on the two books of Revelation, Scripture and creation. And it struck me that it's easy for us to affirm that the heavens declare the glory of God. But what about our phones? Do silicon chips declare the glory of God? Does 5G everywhere tell us about the work of his hands? Do we see his revelation in touch screens? Because that's really what technology is, right? Human beings interacting with the world that God has placed us in, studying it, fiddling with it, figuring out more and more of the secrets that have always been present in creation. Humans have always been doing this technologizing, this making of artifacts. We could quote Ecclesiastes here and say there's nothing new under the sun. But yet it does seem like something is different. So, this brings me around to the thesis of this talk. We now, I think, live in an era that a famous philosopher, there are such things as famous philosophers, the philosopher Martin Heidegger has dubbed the technological age. We'll dig into that a little bit more later, but for now I want to phrase the question like this: is technology a tool or is it a worldview? Do you know that word, worldview? Some of you have probably heard it in high school or even before that, but for me, it was a new concept when I arrived at Dort. The idea, at least around here, and the reason that it's so important, especially in places like the philosophy department, is something that springs out of the Kuyperian Calvinist idea that all of our lives are lived before the face of God. The Reformed understanding of God is he is the creator, the king, and the sovereign over every square inch of our lives. So the way that we set our minds on things above, or the way that we are transformed by the renewing of our minds, isn't just something that happens with the Bible or at church, but something that touches every part of our lives. It's not just a Bible view or a morality view or an afterlife view. It is a whole, everything from the smallest subatomic particle to the farthest galaxy that we don't even know about yet, cosmic worldview. Worldviews shape us. I like to think about a worldview as informing the vision of our possibilities, problems, and priorities of our lives. And there are a lot of definitions for what a worldview is, but today let's use this framework. You can change the slide now. From Brian Walsh and Richard Middleton's book, The Transforming Vision. A worldview, they say, always answers four questions. Who are we? Where are we? What's the problem? And what's the solution? Now, if we were in Sunday school, I'm sure we could come up with some super quick answers to this. Who are we? God's children. Where are we? God's creation. What's the problem? Sin. What's the solution? Jesus. Of course, that's all very true, but I want to challenge you to think a little bit more deeply and more specifically about how you might answer these questions. You can do this in your small groups later, but actually I want these questions to kind of linger with you for your whole lives. Each experience that we have, each year that we age, each instance of joy and sorrow helps to shape the answers to these basic questions. Who am I? Laremy? A Christian? Husband? Papa? Guitarist, philosopher, barista, hockey coach? Trust me, these are not ways that I would have answered that question 25 years ago. So keep them with you. I don't want to limit you in your pondering of these questions, but I think that we can agree to some generalized answers to them. That's not to say we're done, of course, but just to open up more space for further questions. Who are we, or who are you, Dort students? Members of a community of learning, God's image bearers, God's stewards to his creation, responding to his call to love and learn and serve. And not only that, but we are a we. Dr. Westphal reminded us of that as well last week. The Bible is to be read in community. We are always together. We are the body of Christ, a chosen nation, a royal priesthood. The first problem that God encountered with his creation, even before the fall, was that man was alone. It is not good for man to be alone. Let us form a suitable helper. Where are we? Dort, Iowa, America, Earth. Yes, but also more importantly, we are on God's created earth. We are creations in charge of a creation. We are made out of the dust of the earth and therefore connected to it. It is not ours, it is God's. And God takes joy in every part of it, even the parts that we don't understand yet. As dust creatures, we are tiny and often kind of stupid. We're made of mud, and often our thoughts are muddled. There's much we do not know or understand, and the proper response to our dustiness is a posture of humility. So what's the problem? Sin, of course. But a sin that leads to what? Selfishness, greed, fear that we might not have something or that someone else might take something. And I think ultimately the problem is that we have a desire to control, to know. It seems ironic, I suppose, that's the word for it, that our first sin was a desire for knowledge. And I once heard someone say that at the beginning of the 20th century, the center of the academic world was Germany. They had the most universities, the smartest professors, the most famous philosophers. And where did it lead them? 2 devastating world wars. Francis Bacon coined the phrase, knowledge is power. And to mash that up with another famous phrase from Lord Acton, power corrupts. So if our original sin is the desire to know, and if human history has told us that knowledge is power and that power corrupts, how do we deal with that question in an academic institution? We are, after all, seeking knowledge, but how do we protect ourselves from the fruits of that tree? I think I'll save my discussion of the solution for the end of this and take a turn to look at how a technological worldview might propose answers to these questions. I'll take a quick aside here to both cite my sources and name drop for the professors in the room. That's important, of course. A lot of my thinking on this has been influenced by the aforementioned Martin Heidegger and his description of the technological age. Also, Jacques Ellul's writing on what he calls technological society, as well as Abraham Kuyper, Herman Dooyeweerd's understanding of modernity is fleshed out by Walsh and Middleton, Egbert Scruman. Okay, had to get that out of the way. What do possibilities, problems, and priorities look like in the technological worldview? How does the technological worldview answer the 4 questions that Walsh and Middleton ask? Again, I hope not to answer these questions for you entirely, but to give you a springboard for you to think about them today and hopefully for the rest of your lives. Who are we? What is a person? Or perhaps better, what is the ideal person in the technological society? I think the answer is someone who is independent, autonomous, in control. A consumer who can have the latest and the most current whatever. We love to use phrases like independently wealthy to describe our heroes. We want to be the masters of the universe. Where are we? Well, planet Earth, of course, but we certainly aren't on the same team as our planet in the technological worldview. Our job is to conquer, man versus wild, fighting against nature, battling climate change. Humans become the center of any worth or value judgment that anything can have. So where are we? On a threatening, challenging ball hurtling through space. The planet is, again, to use a word from Martin Heidegger, simply a resource. Something that is standing in reserve, waiting for us to call it onto it, to do our bidding, to turn it into what it really is supposed to be, something that serves us. Perhaps now would be a good time to stress the importance of what a worldview actually is. We're not talking about some vague, that's your opinion, or that's how you see things, or you do you, or some kind of perspectival attitude. Again, to quote Heidegger, this is how everything that is shows up. A mountain is no longer a mountain, it is a potential copper mine, or better yet, lithium. An acre of dirt is no longer an acre of dirt, it's bushels per acre, and it's dollars per bushel. Time is money. A cow is its time to market. I could go on and on, of course. These questions are deep and important and very serious, and they demand answers, whether we want to face them or not. Sorry. It's one of those philosopher rants that we're so often known to go on. Back to the point. What's the problem? This is a fascinating question in the technological worldview. And sometimes I joke with students that all you have to do is watch any commercial to see how this gets played out in real time. Who am I? Someone that suffers from psoriasis. Where am I? In a hostile world of people who will judge me because of the spots on my skin. What's the problem? I can't live a normal life. What's the solution? Oatzella. No, you don't. You never see those commercials? It's amazing to me, all these diseases that I didn't even know existed. Of course, you could fill in any commercial and think about the problems, large or small. What's the solution? The new iPhone 15 with titanium, the new Ford Lightning that can power your entire house, getting home or auto insurance. And I don't even want to get into the political ads that you're about to see. Welcome to Iowa in election season. One of the things that I love the most about being a teacher is having students, and the fact that so often these roles get reversed and the students teach me. I thought about the question of the problem and the solution in the technological society for a long time, and I often end up with my blinders on. I want to look at a new piece of technology, chatbot, for example, as a problem. Or maybe it's capitalism or consumerism or the demand for efficiency that I'll rail against. But I recently had a student from Honduras comment that the real answer to the what's the problem, what's the solution question in America comes down to one thing: comfort. The problem is that we are uncomfortable, and the solution is to make life more comfortable. I think that she's right. The goal of the technological society is to make you comfortable, from the way that it offers you food to the way it offers you church and the temperature of your dorm room. Well, except for North Hall, I suppose. Some things haven't changed in 25 years. All right, going back to Heidegger. As he describes a resource, which is what I'm trying to say here, how everything that is shows up in the technological age, even people, he says that one thing that a resource does not do is make demands on us. A resource is ready and waiting whenever we want to call upon it. Think about Netflix or Amazon or a 24/7 supercenter. Time is meaningless. Place is meaningless. The way to be ultimately comfortable is to have nothing make a demand on you. while you get to make demands on everything else. The ultimate solution for the technological worldview is this: comfort means control. Comfort and control, are they synonyms? They might not seem like it at first. One is so active and the other is so passive, but I think if we look deeper, we can see the connection. How about this for an example? Maybe any of you athletes can relate. We all know that player, that person who needs to have total control of a game, whether that's a basketball player, a hockey player, whatever. They need to be on the puck. They need to have the ball. They need to be in control. They won't pass. They don't trust their teammates. They're only comfortable when they are in control. This, I think, is a good picture of those bad parts of human nature that the technological worldview magnifies and exploits. It's hard for humans to give up control, and a lack of control makes us uncomfortable. So, what's the opposite problem-solution paradigm to the technological worldview? Well, I guess instead of comfort and control, it looks like discomfort and trust, vulnerability and faith, risk and hope. Let me quote another philosopher for you, a French thinker from the 1600s, Pascal. He says, faith means putting yourself out. Yourself. The problem with technology isn't the screens or the phones or the gigabytes. It's the fact that it so easily hides yourself. The biblical Christian worldview obviously sees Christ and his birth, death, resurrection, ascension, and rule as the ultimate solution to the problem. But what does that mean for you? It means faith. It means trust. It means giving up control. Being uncomfortable sometimes, maybe a lot of times. It means putting yourself out there. Maybe another synonym or way that we might think about technology in our lives is by using the word media. And that's what technology so often is, right? It's media. It's a thing that goes between. It mediates. Pascal's version of faith is that you put yourself out there. Technology, when it's at its best, gives us ways to put technology, when it's best, gives us ways to put ourselves out there, to practice presence across miles, whether that be on a phone or an airplane. But technology at its worst lets us hide ourselves, to not be a part of a real body, part of a real community. Dr. Westphal again reminded us last week that a reformed understanding of the Bible is never separated from a real, living, breathing community of saints. A community that can make demands on us, on our time and our presence. And this, I think, is an important part of the solution of the biblical worldview, and one that combats the technological worldview that we see all around us. The solution to our problems isn't for me as an individual to simply escape the troubles of this world, either through my exertion of control targeted at my personal comfort and reduction of risk and fear, or through some personal salvation project where I only see the important thing to strive for is me in heaven when I die. No, the solution to the problem is giving up control. To, with Christ, suffer through and with the discomforts of a community of saints, to trust enough in the work of Christ to take risks, leaps into spaces of discomfort and lack of control, to take our gifts and talents and to hone them so that they can be of service to Christ, and through Christ, our head, to his entire body, especially to those that we see around us right now. And with that body, to serve the creation that we are called to care for. The year started off with President Hoekstra here on this stage, talking about this weird word, catechesis. He described it as instruction by word of mouth. In that lecture, he talked about oral exams with Mark Taslar, of which I had many in my student days. But of course, more daunting were the ones with Dr. Hodgson. Perhaps some of you in this room might remember those. This is not only a non-technological way of doing education, but it also seems like an intentional act that flies in the face of a technological worldview. Sure, chatbot could write all of your papers, and you could be comfortable. You could get your degree. And if you just change enough words and perhaps add in a few grammatical and spelling errors, no one would notice, right? All right. I'm feeling nostalgic, so let me bring up another 90s reference. Have any of you seen the movie Office Space? No? Yes? A couple? Okay. Just the professors in the back of the room. Well, it's a great movie. In a lot of ways, it predated and perhaps even inspired that hit TV show, The Office. But it's about a typical technological company that's sort of going through some downsizing or resizing or right-sizing or whatever the jargon is for it. And a couple of consultants come in, and they're known as the Bobs. The Bobs have a meeting with each and every employee of the company, and they ask this simple question. What would you say you do here? Oddly, this is the one driving question behind a lot of my philosophical work. What would you say you do here? What would you say you're doing here as a student? What are we doing as professors? Why do we exist as an institution? Why can't you just get an online education? I mean, you could learn everything you would need to know from YouTube, right? Are you just here for one more step on the comfort ladder? Get a degree, get a job, maybe get a spouse, make money? Are we, your professors, just resources to fill you with information so that you can take these steps? Are you, our students, just tuition payers who ultimately pay our paychecks so that we can create a comfortable life for ourselves and our families? Or do we, as a learning community full of faith, hope, love, do we trust each other and trust God enough to do the work, even when it's uncomfortable and hard? Catechesis is uncomfortable learning. It requires you to put yourself out. It requires showing up for class even at 8 a.m., which I'm not proud to admit I didn't do so well 25 years ago. And mostly, it requires this one funny little thing that technology can never reproduce: breath. A few weeks ago, Dr. Fulkerson inspired us to take seriously the intellectual and rational aspects of our soul. And these are important parts of our human flourishing, especially at a place of higher learning like Dort. But of course, as I was turning these things over in my brain, I thought back to the very first time in the Bible the word soul is used. And Yahweh formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. I once heard a rabbi, on YouTube incidentally, say that the only consonants that a human being can speak without closing their mouths are Y, H, W, H. Yahweh. God is the breath of every human soul. This is God's presence and his gift in every square inch, every round second, every breath of your life. The technological worldview seeks knowledge and power to manipulate and control the world and to make it comfortable. It makes all of our endeavors, and especially those things that happen at universities, lessons in comfort and control. The biblical worldview, with its emphasis on creation, fall, redemption, and the kingdom of Christ, relinquishes control. It replaces knowledge with learning. It always hopes, always trusts, and always perseveres. Is everything that you see around you just a resource for you to use as you will? Or will you, with faith, hope, and love, put yourself out there as a living, breathing image bearer of God, desiring to serve through learning? I think that I can speak for most of you professors when I say this. That's what we want. We want yourself, your breath, your work, your risk, your ideas, even if they're crazy. We want your half-thought thoughts, and even if you get it wrong, or more often, not quite right, we want you to trust in our learning community. Technology is great. It is part of the way that God reveals himself to us, part of the way that he speaks to us, part of his nature and his law. But when technology becomes our idol and dominates our worldview, well, things don't seem to go so well. So I encourage you, use technology, explore technology, develop technology, study technology. But don't let it dominate the way that you see the world. All right. Well, Bailey told me to write 3,000 words.